Well, we've been seeing and hearing a lot about the huge economic impact caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, but there has been less coverage of the plight of nonprofits, which are often on the front lines during times of struggle. Joining us is Holly Sampson, Executive Director of the Duluth Superior Area Community Foundation. And Holly, welcome and thank you very much for coming in right now. These are very trying times for everyone, but what are you hearing from nonprofit leaders in our region?
So this is a really critical time for nonprofit organizations, and they are really struggling. It's really a time of crisis, Julie, for many different organizations. So, you know, we think about the amazing nonprofits we have in this region and thinking about Grandma's Marathon, you know, a nonprofit that had to cancel the marathon, and Hartley Nature Center, and a wonderful environmental organization, has had to close their doors, and you know, the human service organizations that are serving our most vulnerable populations. You know, we're really, all of us as grant-making organizations, and hopefully the whole community needs to really support our nonprofits at this time, because like healthcare workers that we all think about every day who need, you know, protective personal equipment to keep them safe, you know, the staff and volunteers of our nonprofit organizations also face those same challenges as they work with individuals across the community. So, you know, we hear about the Damiano Center, for example, that has closed its community kitchen, but is now giving free meals curbside, you know, in a bag. So they're doing breakfast, lunch, and dinner during the week for very low-income people who really need that kind of service today. So they have been impacted on many fronts, and I think it's really a critical time for everyone in the community to support the nonprofit organizations.
And the foundation itself has been impacted by this. You've had to kind of change the way that you do business in your own offices too.
Absolutely. We're all working remotely now, just like all the businesses across the community, and that has gone well for us. But you know, the financial challenges that nonprofit organizations will face because they're no longer having fundraising events, and they, you know, really rely on those fundraising events for their operating revenue. Organizations that rely on ticket revenue, so the Duluth Superior Symphony and the Minnesota Ballet, you know, those are organizations that that have events throughout the spring, and those, of course, have all been canceled. So the revenue stream for operating support for nonprofits across the board is diminishing really quickly. The other, you know, really support system is, you know, the many volunteers that nonprofit organizations rely on. And so today, it's really difficult for volunteers to step forward. We've been fortunate that some have been able to continue to do that, but nonprofit organizations will be faced with having to hire additional employees to fill the gap that volunteers have filled in the past.
So the Duluth Superior Area Community Foundation and other organizations in the region have come together recently to set up COVID-19 response funds, two of them, one in Northeast Minnesota and one in Northwest Wisconsin. Talk a little bit about that, and you know, who those partners are and what they bring to the table in terms of maybe mobilizing resources.
Absolutely. So there are 5 of us, grant-making organizations, who have come together. So it includes the Ordine Foundation, the Northland Foundation, the Lloyd K. Johnson Foundation, and the Head of the Lakes United Way. So they are all partners with us that are working on the Northeast Minnesota Response Fund, and then we'll be working with United Way as a partner on our Northwest Wisconsin Fund. So during these especially challenging times, and you know, we worked together in 2012 when we were all working on our flood recovery. So we have experience coordinating our grant making. So we have just started meeting. We are now meeting on a weekly basis. So we are both trying to raise additional dollars for both of those funds through the Community Foundation. and then we will be working together to really distribute those dollars that are that will go to nonprofit organizations who are really struggling and serving primarily the most vulnerable in our community. We will also be making grants from each of our institutions as well. So we'll be coordinating our grant making so we make sure that we can spread our dollars throughout the region.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of area nonprofits being able to access these funds, do you envision kind of a fast-tracked grant process, application process, and distribution process? How do you see that occurring?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Julie. So as we think about our guiding principles for our grant making right now, it's about being flexible. It's about being able to release programmatic restrictions when we have an opportunity to do that with grants that we all have in our current grant making cycle. It's about a very rapid response. So we have put together with the due diligence that we need to do and the review that we will do with our 5 partners, we expect to really accelerate the decision making. So from the point of first contact to getting the check out the door, we expect that to last no longer than 2 weeks, which is really accelerating what we would typically do. And then we also, as I mentioned, want to focus on the most vulnerable. So those are the guiding principles that we'll be working together on.
Any ideas, how the size of these grants that might be available to organizations, or you say organizations that work with the most vulnerable, and do you examples of the kinds of nonprofits that you expect to really have these dollars go to work for? Yeah,
so first really on the priority list are certainly those that have residential programming. So organizations like the services that Chum provides at the Steve O'Neill Apartments, and you'll hear a little bit more from Lee Stewart about the great work that they're doing there. The Safe Haven, which is of course a shelter for women and children, and of course we've seen, as is true all across the country, increased reports of domestic violence now that so many states have stay-at-home mandates from their governors. So we think about Harbor House over in Superior, which is a homeless shelter and some permanent and supportive housing. All of those organizations that provide residential services to the most vulnerable are just like healthcare workers. They're really at risk, just like healthcare workers are today. But there are many, many other organizations that I mentioned that organizations now, because as you asked, we're working remotely. We have had to put in new computers, new software systems. All nonprofit organizations that are working remotely have to incur those additional expenses as well. So those organizations that need to adapt to the new working environment will certainly not have the funding because it isn't something that they anticipated in their 2020 budget. So there are a lot of specific needs that we know will be. We're already, Julie, receiving many more requests than the funding that we each have available can support. So that's certainly one of the reasons why we're coordinating our grant making, but also why we need to raise additional dollars from the community to really support these organizations.
And how has that community response been so far? It hasn't been up and running for real long,
right,
but
right.
Is it a strong start?
Yeah, so we really just, we just announced these funds, and it was great, it was really great to have the initial press coverage that we had early on. So, many donors have already stepped forward, but we'll continue to do some announcing of that fund, and again, we really want to see that both of those funds grow in a significant way.
Mm-hmm. Now, you have been with the foundation since 1990, planning to retire this summer. We only have 30 seconds or so, but what a swan song this is for you, going out to be, at the helm at such a critical point. Any thoughts on that?
you know, we're working full speed ahead. I have a fabulous team, and obviously this kind of work, you know, takes an entire team to put this kind of work together. So, you know, it's just been, Julie, a pleasure and a joy for me to work at the Community Foundation and just all of the amazing stakeholders that we have. I feel so fortunate to do what I've been able to do. So,
all right. Well, Holly
thank you.
Sampson, thank you so much for your decades of work with the Duluth Superior Area Community Foundation and all you've done for the community. And good luck as you move forward trying to mobilize these resources to address this pandemic. It's really a strange time, and we really need organizations like yours. Thank you.
Thank you.